Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Philip Dean, Director of the Media Lab. And this is our fourth session this afternoon. This will be in English, and the next two also will be in English, and then the final session will be in Finnish at 4 o'clock. But this session's a little different. It's not a panel, but an interview between the Artistic Director of the Media Labs and Lume's Crucible Studio, Mika Tuomola, and Jessica Mulligan, who we're very pleased to have here today. Jessica's a veteran of the game industry with 18 years experience in the field. Mika, as mentioned earlier on today, was one of our original MA students way back in 1994. One of the first graduates of the lab, and his final degree project, which he made with a group of our students, was called Daisy's Amazing Discoveries, and it was really one of the first examples of web-based interactive drama. And it's only unfortunate that the technology has changed so much since those days that we can't really appreciate Daisy as we might like to, because it won't run on the current servers. But Mika works in Crucible, our joint effort with Lume, which has been created to investigate and help redefine the art of storytelling in new media. The studio has invited Jessica to be a guest consultant in a seminar next week, and she'll also be lecturing in the Games and Storytelling Seminar, which is a 3-year educational program which we're about to kick off. And next Tuesday her lecture's title is Designing Stories for the Connected World, where the designer's storytelling stops and the player's begins. Jessica is executive producer of Turbine Entertainment and oversees the direction and development of Turbine's award-winning online game franchise, Asheron's Call. And before the discussion begins, we'll see a short glimpse of the gaming world on the screen above.
Okay.
Welcome, Jess.
Thank you.
So Asheron's Call is just one of the many online multiplayer games that you have created and been a part of the development team of. There have been hundreds, literally hundreds of thousands of participants in the game worlds like Ultima Online, Middle-earth, Gemstone 2 and 3, Warcraft 2 Online, Dragon's Gate, and so forth. Over a dozen online game worlds. To kind of start to track the personal history background, that how have you been capable of entertaining yourself in producing these things for 18 years now? To look at the short previous history, where were you born?
I was born in Washington State, which is in the northwestern corner of the United States, a small town named after a Native American chief named Wenatchee. So its claim to fame is it's the apple capital of the world.
So 30 years later, there was born another person, Toranaka-sama. Who was she, and what is this birth about?
Well, that was in my first online game. When I got into this industry, I got into it as a file librarian for the Apple II section of Genie, which was one of the proprietary online services back in the middle 80s before the internet was popularized. And I was a game player, but there really were no multiplayer games that I was aware of at the time. And then one day I was a volunteer. It was a free account, which was great because at that time it was the cost to use these online services was, let me convert, about €7.25 per hour. So it was very expensive. Having a free account was a good thing. one day my boss called me up and said, "You've got to get online to this game. You know, that there's this game on Genie, they're in test, you've got to get on and play." I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, there's 80 people playing right now." Well, in 1986, that was unheard of. 80 people playing simultaneously. Oh my God. So I jumped in. It was this game called Stellar Warrior. It was a space combat game, basically. And after an hour, I was dripping with sweat. I was physically and emotionally exhausted after having battled with and against 80 people for an hour. And I just leaned back and I just said, "Oh my God, I have got to do this for a living."
So what you had done in living before, you were working as a professional actor, specializing in Shakespeare.
Yes.
And thinking of this kind of experience you then had as an actor in the role-playing game, you also said in my first interview question that when you are a professional actor, you're also a professional security guard and waiter. But this transshift that you just wanted to do it for a living, how do you see your acting relations relating to the multiplayer?
You know, it fell right into it. You know, actors play roles, and when you play a game online, since nobody knows who you are, you know, they can't see who you are on the other side of that screen, really. It's what you present them. So it's a perfect opportunity to play a role and tell your own little story, right? Present yourself. Like in the game Stellar Warrior, you could fight other players, obviously. Well, I was very good at it. I found I was very good at killing other players. So players would actually like bribe me not to kill them, which was, to me, like, this is the perfect way to play this game. I don't have to manage planets. I don't have to team up with anybody. People were actually paying me to go kill other players as a harassment tactic to keep them off their back. So I developed the character of Toranaga, who was a mercenary. And he didn't manage planets. He just hung out, and when everybody saw him, they would like, "Hey, don't kill me. Here's 200 gold. Go kill that guy." So,
you've been now running the Assurance Call for several years, and so many other multiplayer worlds. With your acting background and how you describe you getting into the character in your very first experience in '86, do you find that layman players, not into acting or theater, do things any differently than how you do your character in online?
In concept, no. Mainly because, you know, if you and I were playing online, I wouldn't know you unless I had met you in real life or we were friends. All I would know about you is the role you were playing. So it's just like real life acting, right? Some people are pretty good actors and some people aren't such good actors, and they tend to gravitate into their special groups. So, no, the players do the same thing. They're playing around and trying different things that they could never do in real life. So they're presenting as many different roles as they can.
So do you think this is the primary purpose of, you know, huge mass participatory fiction worlds that you create? Is it an escape from the reality, or what's the relationship between the created participatory fiction and the real world?
I think the initial motivation is to escape from the day-to-day grind, to escape from reality, but reality always pops in, right? I mean, you just can't get away from it. I'll give you an example, a quick example. So you may be playing a mage character in one of our role-playing games, and your role that you've chosen for yourself is to be a healer and you know, a diplomat, and to try to heal, you know, relationships online or people who have been hurt in combat. But maybe you trust somebody too much and you give them your password and say, "Look, I'm going on vacation," right? So will you get on in a couple of days and just make sure my house online is okay and everything's okay? And you may come back and find you've trusted the wrong person in real life because your character is trashed, your house is trashed, you have nothing left, right? So you can't really get away from reality, even though that's what you're trying to escape from.
So is it a kind of a test tube for real life?
I think it's a test tube for exploration. I think people are trying things that they could never do in real life. And it's well known that there's a lot of gender bending going on in these games. You know, so the ratio is about 70% are male players and 30% are female players. But the ratio of male to female characters in the game is about 50-50. Right? So, you know, there's some guys out there who are, you know, "I've never been a woman, I could never be a woman in real life. I wonder how women get treated." And so they start a female character and off they go.
So next Tuesday at 5 o'clock in the Lume Center's Sampo Hall. You'll be giving a talk on where the designer story starts and where it begins and where the player story starts. About this relationship of have you ever faced up in your long history on the design team's startup story conflicting with the one that the users are creating?
All the time. And about the first thing I learned when I started designing online role-playing games was you just can't anticipate what the players are going to do. Their collective intelligence is so much greater than your small teams that they'll figure out all the cracks in your story, every flaw that you've made, that you've designed into the game, and they'll exploit it, or they'll just do it some different way. And so, I mean, what I learned was you have to be as much a director as just a storyteller. You can do the backstory and you can get the story started, and then the players are just going to take off, right? They've made it their story, and if you try to force them into this linear beginning, middle, and end, you're going to come out with a very unsatisfactory experience. What you have to do is just like keep yourself at a distance and react to what they're doing, right? Be flexible and be willing to change your story on the fly because of the interesting things the players do.
Did you ever improvise in your acting career?
In my acting career? Oh yeah, especially when I was mad at another actor. Yeah. I remember one time in the middle of a show, I just another actor had pissed me off on backstage before the show. So out of nowhere, I picked up the telephone on stage, even though I wasn't supposed to. Listened for a moment, and then handed it to him and said, "It's for you." And then I walked off stage.
Well, I've heard the rumor that you have the same straightforward attitude in managing virtual communities.
Yeah.
You bitch.
That's Ms. Bitch to you.
Can you tell a story of doing a virtual community management and improvising the story direction for a single player or a tribe of players?
Oh, sure. Once in actually Ultima Online about 5 years ago, we had designed this huge scenario where the bad guys took over one of the player cities online. And we thought we had designed it so tightly that the players could never take the city back. And so everything, if this was an example of really bad design, okay? Everything depended on the bad guys maintaining control of that city. We got up one morning, and on one of the worlds, the players had, at like 2 o'clock in the morning, called all their friends, and hundreds of them had got online and taken the city back. Okay, now what the hell we do? All right? You look at it and you go, oh my God, there goes our entire story. There goes 2 months worth of work. Now what? So we just said, we're going to go with it. We're going to go with it. So we started, we created new characters. A messenger from the governor arrived congratulating them, and awards were handed out. The bad guys came back and tried to take the city and failed. And so we just said, okay, it's your city. We're going to name it after your guild now. So we changed the entire name of the city to their guild name, and it still lives in the game today, and they're proud of that. I mean, their website, even though that guild doesn't really exist in Ultima Online anymore, the lore does, because they keep their website up so everybody will know they were the one guild out of 250,000 players that took a city back during this thing.
Yeah. So the skill in maintaining and keeping a good story world going is actually, to make the worst case scenarios into
exactly
factors of loyalty for the community and the story.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm sure that some of those guys still play the game now 5 years later. Yeah, so and they enjoy talking about that. And it's an example of how we were forced to be flexible. All right, so you should learn from our mistakes, right? Be flexible at the start and know that your story is going to change because of what the players do.
About learning mistakes, I just last night finished your wonderful book on Insider's Guide to the Development of Online Worlds, which really is written in order for not people make the same mistakes you've done during 18 years. Talking about those mistakes, can you just briefly say a few things that when you do participatory storytelling with huge multiplayer functions, what are the kind of primary things you should not do?
Okay, so you shouldn't have a linear storyline. That's the very first thing. When you're dealing with thousands of players, never have a beginning, middle, and end programmed out. The beginning is probably as far as you want to go, although you can get away with programming a middle in there. but you have to observe every step of the way what's going on. So that the first rule is always be flexible in storytelling in these online, massively multiplayer worlds. The second one is be willing to react on a minute's notice. Right? That's part of being flexible. And I think the third is have fun with it. Right? See, the players are having fun with it, or they should be. If they're not, you're doing something horribly wrong, and that's also another option that's happened. You got to have fun with it and understand that they're right there with you. They want to be entertained. They want you to help them entertain themselves.
So what do you do with unethical behavior in community that actually does what you call barbarian players, who actually are there just to disturb others' story or game experience?
Well, most of the time you can handle that within the context of the game. For the barbarians in the games that I've been in, we'll do various things like create a core of non-player character guards that are like can't be beat, period. I mean, on one-on-one combat, they can't be beat. If somebody starts acting up, you send one of those guys in as a warning, and you slash the guy down, and it's like they usually get the message. For the ones that are just completely bad actors who are just bad boys, you really you have to pull them aside in the game, lock them down, and in an out of character way, just tell them, if you just keep doing that, we're going to kick you out of the game. We don't want your $12 a month if you're going to act like this.
Yeah. So going from the story world ethics to the real world ethics, in your Stockholm column in the internet, which you've been writing for 7 years, and are you having a break? Are you at some point going to continue this wonderful column series?
I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I mean, I've been on break for about 1.5 years, and I stopped because I was no longer entertaining myself with the text. And I figured if I couldn't even entertain myself, I certainly wasn't entertaining the readers at all. So I don't know. We'll see.
But one thing you've been very critical of has been the ethics, or the mirror that the games industry in general is holding up to the face of the participants and audiences. What kind of mirror do you think games industry is holding up to mankind?
Well, I think the point is, I don't think that the game industry is actually holding up a mirror to mankind at all. I think they're holding it up to their own face, right? So I think it's like I said to you in one of the emails, you look at the games that are being developed for the most part, they're first-person shooters where your goal is to pull a trigger and kill something. Or another first-person game whose purpose is pull a trigger and kill something. I sense a pattern, right? So it's like, well, who are they designing these games for? Serial killers? It's like, I found the first one fun, and after that, I don't. So I think what they're doing is they're holding it up to their own face, and what they see is a very young, testosterone-laden kid who has no respect for women or themselves or society at large, and they're just living out their own fantasies and appealing to that small group that does the same thing. I think if they would actually turn it around and find a way to hold that mirror up to society, we'd get much better games.
So what can we do about this sad state of the mainstream games industry at the moment?
I don't know, shoot the designer? I think that programs like what's happening here at the Media Lab, we don't have a close enough connection to academia. Now, I'll be the first one to say, maybe this is the wrong audience to say that left on its own devices without some real-world anchor, academia will go so far over the other end that they'd be completely unrealistic for what players do. But what we're seeing on the game side is that they're going off on the other end, right? So we need to reach that middle ground. Academia and its ideas need to come together with the commercial side of the business to reach some happy medium. So we're actually building games that make people think, give them something to do other than pull a trigger or kill something. We don't see very many of those games at all. The Sims, look at the... Okay, how much time we have?
Oh, we have. Please, go on.
All right, so...
Don't worry about the time.
So I'm sure everybody's heard of The Sims from Maxis and EA and Will Wright. What you probably don't know is that it took Will Wright 3 years to sell that game to EA. Even though he worked for them, they had bought Maxis, they didn't want to do it because everybody at EA, at the headquarters high up, nobody's going to buy this game and play it. This is the stupidest idea you've ever had, Will. Well, because he made them so much money with the other Sims games, Sim Golf and Sim City and Sim Nation, they said, okay, we'll spend a little bit of money on it and we'll see what happens. You know, and so of course in 6 months it became the best-selling PC game of all time. Why? Because you could do something other than pull a trigger, right? It appeals to somebody other than a 13-year-old pimply-faced kid who wants to sit in a corner pulling the wings off flies and giggling hysterically, right? So, I mean, that's a perfect example. And how did it take off? The hardcore players bought it, played it for an hour and said, this sucks. And then their girlfriends came along and said, that looks kind of neat. What is that? And then the game took off.
So there is the gap between the academia and obviously with the games industry.
Right.
How about the gaps between the games industry, cultural industries like cinema and theater, and kind of authorship thought as author who creates the piece and which is untouched by the participant or audience? Can you see those gaps between the art world, the games industry, the academia, and what's your take on those relationships?
My take on it is some of those gaps really need to be there. I mean, not all, I mean, online, you know, the major form of entertainment is participatory, right? You're in there, you want to be a part of it, you want to create your own legend and your own story. But on the other end, there's like in cinema and some of the role-playing games that you see, it's all about being led on an adventure where you learn something about yourself by observing what happens to others, right? So there needs to be a little bit of gap in there. They serve different purposes. But where we need to find is maybe there's some tendrils that can come together on those, you know? Maybe we could find ways for a little bit of cinema and art and a little bit of game playing to come together so you can participate in the creation of the art, right? So, and other people can watch that happening, and maybe we come up with a whole new art form.
Yeah, we should hope so. I know that in the audience we have both new and old students in the Media Lab, and most of them working with a participatory media and the whole experience. For those new students who are entering the interactive domain and attempting to tell stories in interactive manner or designing games, what will be your guidelines to do now before entering development?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One, spend a lot of time online communicating with other people in various different capacities. Play the massively multiplayer games, play the little classic games that are free to see how people react, because you have to understand the dynamics of the group. Two, the best designers I've ever known are those who have a broad education. Everything from computer science to mythology, philosophy, you know, watercolor, basket weaving, you name it. You know, they have a broad educational experience and a broad base of knowledge to draw on. In Asheron's Call, when we introduce a new race or a new continent, we're always looking at history or other cultures. We've used New Zealand Maori culture as a background. The expansion pack we're using right now is the Italian city-states. And that dynamic and how people fight. So, but the more you know about those, the more you can draw on those memes that people are familiar with and then take them to a new level. Those are the two most important things. Really know who your audience is that you're trying to design this for, and just as broad an education as you could possibly get.
So yesterday at dinner you were telling both Lena and I that you were almost planning retiring from the games industry and work on your 2 book projects, but then you were taken back to Asheron's Call and you couldn't resist just staying in, both as a creative director and executive producer for this world. What do you figure out are your next future steps in this wonderful genre?
I think we're at a crux point. We're at a very interesting point in the creation of the industry. I think massively multiplayer games are my first love, but that's only a starting point. I look at what groups like you're doing and Nokia and some of the groups in the United States, and I think what I realized about 5 years ago, one of the reasons that I wanted to retire and think a lot, was that now that the digital revolution is here, we have so many electronic entry points into our lives that it's a new form of art. Just, I mean, you see people that have like a cell phone and a PDA and a pager and fax and everything else, all these electronic portals into and out of our lives that we don't take advantage for a new type of media experience. That's where the future is, right? And I think that's where I'm going to try to take my career, and some of the games with Turbine is taking, I mean, imagine, if you will, right now they use the telephone to call each other up in the middle of the night to get on to do tasks in the game. Well, what if you could just like send out a 911 from the game? You don't have to get offline and break the immersion. You can just send out a message and a little runner dashes off, and then out of your sight a phone call is made, they get online and do it that way. Those are the kind of things that I want to look at.
Thank you, Jess, very much. Shall we? And so Jess and I will go to our little corner to expect your wonderful questions and interesting discussions. We won't have any shooting or any violence, but we will have wild love and free drugs, so welcome.
Not even if a serial killer shows up?
Well, maybe.